and they're being abused violently, not just being raped, which is just the most horrific thing you can think of, but they're literally being tortured and beaten into submission. They're being starved so that they're compliant. Their families, people say, well, why don't they just run away? Why don't people just run away from this? If somebody was doing this to me, I would find a way to escape. But sometimes they'll do things like this, and you have to remember when you're talking about children or young women, you're much more easily manipulated as a child. But if I was to say to you, Dr. Future, I want you to do this thing for me, and you said to me no, and I said to you, do you know what? I know where your family lives, and if you don't do this, I'm going to kill your daughter.
Oh, man.
You know what I mean? And this is the truth of this. This is what goes on, and so these people go, this is bad enough for me. Why would I want to bring any more harm or shame to my family? And their spirits are broken.
Sure.
They give up hope. They just, the stories that we have heard and the level of evil that this is, this is the most evil thing on the planet. On the planet.
Yes.
Right.
A friend of mine, she says, and basically she heard about this when I started doing this, and the Lord just broke her heart as well. And she said to me, and I'm not saying this to make people feel guilty or that other things aren't good things, but she said, Christmas is coming up, and this was last year, and she said, children not having toys is very sad, but it's not a horror. This is a horror.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I always, when I picture this in the scale that you share with us, I just picture what I picture hell being, which is widespread torture of people, wicked people, doing whatever they please without any restraints whatsoever on the innocent. And then I picture something on a slightly smaller scale, and that's what you're talking about.
Yes, that is exactly what we're talking about. But, Christ stormed the gates of hell.
That's right.
For us. That is what we are called to do.
And we've got to be willing to go there. That's right. These things
we have got to be.
They're unspeakable, but they've got to be spoken about.
They have to be, because if we are not even willing to see the horror of what the world is around us because we're so comfortable in the church, what hope does the world stand? 55% of child pornography on the internet comes out of the United States of America.
Wow. Right in our own back door. Well,
that's unbelievable.
I want to talk more about that in the churches. Did you have a comment?
I did. I attended a sermon one time where the pastor gave a statistic that will probably shock a lot of our Christian listeners. He said that he talked with the Los Angeles department chief who investigated child pornography rings, and he asked him what percentage of children, what percentage of these child pornography rings were involved in out-and-out Satanism. And he said 100%, that he had never investigated a case that there was not open Satanism going on or some type of satanic undertones to the whole thing. So what you're talking about...
This is Satan's handiwork all over the place. You don't abuse children and have the heart of God anywhere in it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, to try to picture the scope of what we're talking about in its different manifestations, one of the aspects that I hear, what little I hear it talked about in the news, that I hear most about is the sex culture in the Far East, like Thailand, places like this where we have wealthy businessmen from the West, or maybe even from the East now, that make that their little sadistic, sick playground, where they go over there and basically without any kind of restraints by local government, go to a culture that's just set up to meet their sick needs for the purposes and exploitation of children. I
called
assume
sex tourism.
sex tourism. That's right. That was the
You can
term.
believe that.
Right. But it's basically exploitation and slavery tourism is what it is.
Yes, and we now have a law on the United States in the United States that if you get caught basically being a sex tourist, you can go to jail, I believe, and I'm have to look this up, but I believe it's 30 years. It could be 40. And we have had cases in the United States. I mean, one just fairly recently of a man in Clarksville, I believe, that they went overseas and they got him for sex tourism.
Well, and now we have a scenario where we have, I presume, networks, underground networks in our own country where they don't have to leave our own country that meet the very wealthy and powerful in each one of our communities, can readily have access to this in our own country.
That is so true. I mean, I think that people just think that it is an overseas problem. This is not an overseas problem. This is our problem. Basically, there is a statistic that's put out from the Justice Department. When you look at a report that they put out, they say that there are approximately 800,000 children that go missing or run away every year in the United States. And over the year, that number will, they'll know where some of those children are. They'll be relocated or placed somewhere. But there are approximately 100,000 to 300,000 children that they say are not accounted for. And approximately that number that some people believe that are being sexually exploited for profit in our own country every year. I mean, that's astronomical.
Yeah.
And
it's a good-sized city.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is that you have to look at, and I'm looking right now at, a website, so I'm seeing this statistic before me, is that there are approximately as many as 2.8 children that are living on the streets in the United States of America. And they say a third of those within 48 hours will be lured into prostitution.
Oh, man.
So you do the math on that.
Yeah, this isn't South America. We're talking about the old
This
good
isn't South
US
America. This is the United States of America, and we have to wake up that this is a problem in our own backyard and, start to basically have more homes for these children when they are picked up and they come before the courts that will be able to restore them, more Christian homes, more finances given to people, because not everybody can open a shelter. I want to caution your listeners that are now going to think, well, let's open, my heart is to open a shelter. Mm-hmm. It is not easy to work with these children. Imagine the psychological damage that would be done to you from having to endure something like this. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of love. And some of these children will go back, and that is the sad thing. Mm-hmm. But
Stockholm syndrome almost.
It is. Yeah. It really is. And plus, we have to look at it, from a Christian perspective. We're talking about identity. The whole Christian experience is identity, is that I am now identified as I am in Christ. Mm-hmm. Well, if this is who you think you are, that this is what God created you to do because that's what somebody told you, now what are your options in your own mind?
Right.
It takes a long time for the restoration of somebody that has been victimized.
Well, just I want to make a few other points so people see the scope of what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. When we look at other countries in the third world or other areas that have been ravaged by war, you see this on a extremely large scale where Darfur, I wouldn't be surprised, or areas in that part of the world where large numbers of children are sold into slavery, moved out en masse, although they don't even cover it up. It's not so much underground, it's done openly because lawlessness reigns in those areas. You've got areas like in the East where it's almost become an ingrained part of the culture. I believe places like India? Aren't the numbers pretty staggering in India for?
Well, they are. I mean, I can give you some of the statistics of places that we work. In Nepal, there is an estimated 200,000 young women and children that are sold right now in India into sexual trafficking and labor trafficking. But in India, that number is even more staggering. I mean, we're talking in the millions of people that are being sold into slavery right now. Interpol gave us a number a while ago saying that there is approximately 30,000 missing young women from Romania. 30,000.
No, the one thing these people have in common is all have a perspective that there is no hope.
Well, I mean, how they're lured is that, there might be a promise of a job. You're in a country where there is very little education.
Right.
Poverty is rampant. And somebody comes to you and they say to you, I mean, even as a parent, they might say to you, basically, well, let me take your son or daughter. I have a great job that they can do. Not only can they work, but I will send them to school, and they can send you money back to be able to feed the other children that are in your home. And all of a sudden, this child gets to where it is that they said that this job was, and there is no job. And they say to them, you are now a prostitute. And you say, I'm not a prostitute. And they lock you in a room and starve you until you become compliant, or they rape you until your spirit is broken. I mean, there are children as young as 3 and 4 years old that their entire existence all day long is moving bricks from one place to another. That's what the Nazis did to the Jews.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is they got them because there was no point to it. They made them move stones from one place to another, and when that pile was done, they made them move it back to break their spirits and make them lose hope. Imagine a 4-year-old child that is their existence.
And that's the other aspect, is the sweatshops and the other parts of the world that is using slave labor to perform these other economic duties and things like that. Can't even really call it wages. These people, I guess, just get a bare sustenance in exchange for their focused work.
People need to know that slave labor is in every single thing in our economy, in the coffee industry, in the cotton industry, in the banana industry, in shoemaking, in rugs. It has permeated into every single place in our society, the labor and the selling of people. And we just have to now start saying, you know what, just because something is really cheap, you have to ask then, who is making that on the other side? We have to start being responsible in this somewhere.
Well, as Christians, we've often, I'll speak for myself or from the community I've raised in, we've often seen that people who have those kind of attitudes as being real extremist. They get
marginalized.
Well, those people are really worked up, getting, sort of like with the extreme parts of environmental movement and things like that. They get categorized that way. When I realize that is, as a Christian, if Christians do not see that and take a stand, who will?
But not only that, if we're this churned up as human beings right now when we're talking, imagine how churned up God is.
Well, exactly.
If we cry these kinds of tears, imagine the rivers that are flowing in heaven for these children and people that are being sold like they're commodities. I mean, this is the heart of God. And if we want to have the heart of God, we then have to have our heart broken with what breaks his.
Yeah.
Well, let me understand. If things do not get abated in a serious way, where is this leading? Where do you think the future is going to be?
I believe
within the next
progress. Yeah, I really do believe, and I'm not alone in this, that the number one criminal activity in the entire world in the next 5 years is going to be the buying and selling of human beings. And most of those are going to be children for sex.